All right, hello and welcome everyone. I hope you're doing well today. I hope you can hear me just fine too. I'm having a little bit of audio issues today. Oh yeah, listen to that reverb. Let's make sure to turn that down later. Welcome. I hope you are having a good day. I have my chat open here, so by any and all means, ask questions whenever you feel like it. Let's see, there we go. So today, I'll be performing and also walking you through creating performance templates in Ableton. And what I mean by a performance template is an environment or all the music that you're going to use for a show, whatever audio effects racks that you're going to be using, whatever parameter changes that you're going to be needing, and setting that up in a live, there we go, in a live project file, so that way you can actually perform and not be tied to the computer in a way that's distracting from the performance. And I think, there are a lot of things out there that can help, anyone perform in that way. One of those things is Push. What I have is the APC 40. I think, it gets the job done for what I need. And so, I'm going to talk you through that. But I think first, maybe the most beneficial thing is maybe I play a little bit from one of my performance templates, so that way you get an idea of like what I've done. And I'll go through maybe 3 or 4 performance templates that each have their designated function, if you will. And from there, we'll deconstruct it and then talk about what I did to actually create these templates. So without further ado, this first one is 3 zodiac signs from Stockhausen's Tierkreis for trumpet and electronics. right. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed that. So the 3 zodiac signs that I did were Aries. Oh, let's turn off this verb. Aries, Leo, and Virgo. So if those were your signs, hey, shout out to you over there. You're there today and not there and such. Okay. Let's see. Does anyone on the chat? Nay. Okay. Well, so what did I do here? Well, I've got 3 main tracks for what is just audio tracks. So we've got 2 that are pre-recorded audio tracks, one from my Microbrute and one from my Korg ARP Odyssey. And over here we've got my trumpet track, which I've done some hackery stuff to actually update for today's show. And then besides that, I've got a metronome just in case I'm in a situation where I need a better monitor with a click, just a slight click to get me going, or some parts of my arrangement are solo trumpet, and it's extremely important that I align with the tape again. And there's just open, empty space for me. So a click is helpful. So what I initially did for this entire project was the idea was to do a trumpet and electronics version of Tierkreis. Oh, I can take these off now. Wonderful. So the version which I decided to do, I came up with a overall scheme or form for the piece, and then began to conceive it all, and how I could do this, because again I had given myself certain parameters or constraints to work within, which were I had to use my analog synths, and it had to be with trumpet, and it had to be able to be done live and in a way that was, like I said, didn't tie me strongly to the machine or to twiddle knobs or, distract my attention from everything. So the first step that I wound up doing was taking the original score of Tierkreis. Here's my version. Hey. And I wound up taking the music, both the melody and the harmony part, and transcribing that into Sibelius software. And what wound up happening there is I just notated it just as it is on the sheet music. However, there were some things that Sibelius did not want to do, such as tuplets over a bar. So in situations like that, I wound up either I think the majority of the time what I wound up doing as a solution is just writing the full phrase for that part as the meter. So sometimes, there were bars that had 64 beats, or, some non-standard denomination. However, I knew that come when I get it into Ableton, I would actually be able to finely tune these metric points. So what I wound up doing from there, and actually we can go, I've documented this all on my website, so let's actually go there and I'll give you a little tour. So, if you go to my website, davidaguila.com/Tierkreis, it'll take you right here. And after I was able to get all the MIDI exported from Sibelius, I just wound up importing that into Ableton. And then all the constraints of what would be normal music, such as meter, note duration, all of that was actually done very simply, because all I did was just transcribe this music. So there wasn't a terrible amount of work to do. If you've used Sibelius or if you've done copy work in notation software, this is pretty standard. There's nothing really outside of the box other than tuplets over a bar in regards to the music. So in that sense, it was very, very easy. Double check your work. I had some errors and had to go back and fix them and then re-export them into Ableton. But once that was done, from there, and let's actually go back into Ableton. What I wound up doing, and I can show you right now, is under the instruments, I've already set this up so you'll have to do this on your own. I would one of my my presets here, which in this case it's my microbrute, and the way I have this all routed and it's not set up today is the MIDI goes to my Arturia BeatStep Pro, and then that goes to the proper MIDI channels and then sends that all to the microbrute. And then all I do here, and you can see it, I've got my audio from microbrute coming in. So Ableton is actually just triggering all of this for me. Well, okay, so now I've got the MIDI into Ableton, right? I've got it going to my synths because this was the constraints I've decided. Now the next step for these Tierkreis melodies, and of course I did not only that for the microbrute, I did that for the same steps for the Korg ARP Odyssey. So as we get down, and we can look at this photo here, I made 12 distinct patches for the arrangement. So each zodiac sign, there were 12 distinct patches for the Korg ARP Odyssey and 12 distinct patches for the Arturia microbrute. And once I had done the sound design for each of those, what I wound up doing is I wound up going back into Ableton, and these are MIDI clips that would have all the MIDI that said this is in this case, let's just put it right here. Let's say that this was Ari's, and the first note is an F, all right? So it would have all those parameters and it would just play it. That's a G. When I clicked play, however, the audio wouldn't be recorded. So then I would create another audio track, just say, and I would just record that audio. No effects, just the simple audio. And the way that I had preset all of that was due to, again, this scheme that I had set up much earlier in the process. And you can look through all 12 of my patches here and see what I liked. But if we go into my form scheme here, and we'll look at Ari's. Of course, my internet is being a little bit uncooperative. There we go. So Ari says on the first time it's a duet, it's going to be trumpet playing the melody with the ARP playing the harmony, and the dynamic is forte. The second time it's a solo with microbrute playing forte, although this time I played it as a duet. The slight change that I've done for today, but I'll explain why in a moment. Third time it's a trio with the microbrute only playing the Fs, and in this case I made sure that the Sibelius file reflected this, just because this was would be a much easier adjustment rather than going into the audio file, the late audio file, and recording it. However, this could also be done in the MIDI file in the Ableton track right over here. So if you were like, no, I just want the Fs, you would, select all the notes that are not F and then just delete them. And then the fourth time, microbrute playing the melody with the ARP playing the harmony an octave higher, and it's dynamic. Once the MIDI was all input and set, I recorded the audio, and then if we look here, this is what we have, right? And if we are reflecting this, first time it's trumpet and ARP, second time it's microbrute, If we look at the microboot track, it's 2, 3, and 4. This is the first time, 2, 3, and 4. Now, if you actually look right here, I've got some automation going on. And this is the automation for the audio or the dynamics. Now, I did not, while the audio was being recorded into Ableton, I did not adjust the dynamics of the recording. I felt that in this case it would be easier to do it post, and also if things, if my initial form did not make a cohesive sense in the music, it was easily changeable. Whereas if I had recorded the audio, I would have to go back and re-record the audio with those shifts. So anyway, I wound up deciding to do it this way. And if you are curious how to do that, you'll go into any of these audio clips and you'll select this little tab down here, all the way down here. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. And it says envelopes. And, you know, in this case, I've chosen the mixer and the track volume. And so I've said that the track volume will be this dynamic, and then it'll be this dynamic for the last half of the piece. Very simple, but that way I have a little bit of an adjustment to really make the piece shift over time. Now, the addition that I did today was I added a new bus track with a ring modulator, because why not? Stockhausen used them. And in Aries, I said, oh, I want the ring modulator, the send right here, to go to that amount during the second the second time through the track, or this time through the melody or harmony, and only do it for this moment, and then at the after that have it just be the dry signal. So why don't we just briefly listen to this. I'm going to turn off the main track here, and you'll hear and see it change on the B send from what it is to what it will become. Here we are. Check out this knob. Wonderful. And we can hear it coming out. Great. So I'm now able to actually automate parameter shifts within the clip. And I'm not doing anything in Arrangement View. Arrangement View was all my preliminary work in terms of recording the audio and making sure that the ARP and the microboot aligned. And the music, the real music that I would be playing with, was accurate and timing-wise was set right. However, if we listen to what just played, that's not the right tempo. And in fact, we can see here that our tempo is 80 and the meter is 1/4. Now, the really great thing about this music from Stockhausen is that each one of these melodies has their own meter and own tempi, and they're actually all related. There's a lot of history about this regarding how Stockhausen developed the melodies and the tempi. I won't be talking about that today. I think if you are truly interested in that material, I highly recommend the website Stockhausen space.blogspot by Ed Chang. And if you want to know anything about Karl Heinz and his music, this is a wonderful resource, as well as the Stiftung's website. So enough about that. So the tempi is wrong. So how do I, when I'm performing this, ensure that the global tempo is set properly as well as the meter? And we can see even here within the clip, it's warped, which in this case I would highly recommend turning on warping. Because it was MIDI and everything had been recorded, quantized, and sent out of Sibelius quantized, it was extremely easy. All of this was set up again in my preparation. Well, a wonderful thing on the master track and in your launch scenes, if you set a meter, which in this case I've set 1/4 time, and set your tempo, which is 120 BPM, and you must say, in this order, 1/4 or 3/8 or whatever your meter is, and then your tempi as whatever numerical value that is with BPM at the end. As soon as you launch that scene, Ableton will automatically adjust the global tempo here as well as the global meter. So if I push this, and I'll stop it rather quickly, great. We see that immediately it jumped to 120 up here with 1/4 time. And if I do this just for Aquarius, now we are in 3/8 time at 84.5 BPM. And yes, these tempi are notated by Karl Heinz. So now, in my performance template, I'm nearly done as far as the accompaniment goes, right? I've taken care of the electronics being accurate by putting them into Sibelius and notating them properly. All that MIDI has been sent out and then imported into Ableton, routed to its proper external instrument and MIDI channels to be sent out and then receiving our audio. We've figured out how to record said audio, and now it's here. Now, like I said, we have all these clips. We've done the automation for them. What about the trumpet? Well, in previous versions, I just had an audio track, just as we have here, and I would say, oh, you are going to get, from channel trumpet. Great, we're going to get this track, and it's going to come in. It's going to have, a certain audio effects, which is, Cheer Christ trumpet audio effects. That's going to be here, and maybe a little bit of gain staging, just so I have a little bit of control depending on the location I'm playing it in. However, the one thing that did not ever really work for me when performing this was the trumpet automation. And as you may have heard in Aries and in Leo, in Aries, there's a moment where it goes up an octave, and I actually have it pitch shifted. There's a moment in Leo where there's an LFO on a filter, and it's giving it a little bit of a wub or a dubsteppy feel, but not to that extent, and it's also doing it at random. But in order for me to have done this prior to today, what I would have to do is on my APC 40, I would have to be playing the trumpet, I would be stopping the track, and then I would be twiddling a knob and then setting it to LFO from wherever it is and back and forth. And you can hear,
here we are. Hi, everyone. Yeah, that's nice. Or in the case of the send, right? Now I'm here. But what about the other one? Oh, yeah, now we've got some ring modulation. But, sorry.
But the issue was that I had to do all of these shifts in real time and balancing mute changes, and I'm still having to trigger the track it just never felt organic, and I always felt like I was fumbling. So how did I go about finding a solution about this? And I think this is actually a wonderful thing if you, in your practice, are trying to set up parameter shifts on an audio track, um, and you want it to correspond to a certain song. So this is something that's actually rather new. This was the first time I tried this today. So here we are. I'm going to explain this a little bit more to you about how to automate parameter shifts on an audio track by launching a clip. A MIDI clip, of all things, not an audio clip. Not like this, right? Here we have something that's pre-recorded. If I were to try to do this to an audio clip, it would just play the audio clip and not actually reflect the sound. So what you're actually going to do is create a MIDI clip. And in that MIDI clip, you're going to set up an external instrument, just as we had done with our, audio clips for, or our clips or tracks for our Microbrute and ARP Odyssey earlier in the performance template. And what we'll do is we're going to arbitrarily say that we're going to send MIDI to some place and some channel. And in this case, because I don't have my BeatStep Pro on, I don't think it even matters. I'm going to send this to my XAR 18, which is my audio interface, and we're going to send it to channel 1. This doesn't matter. We can. Pardon me. I wish desperately that we could set this up in a way that would allow for no output, but this isn't going to work like that. However, you'll notice now that I'm receiving audio. I'm receiving the audio from my microphone here on this track. It's not armed. It's set to auto. We're going to get audio no matter what. If you arm or disarm, it's coming through. It's live signal. The only way to mute that is by turning off the track. Ta-da! Now you hear me. Okay, so now we're able to get audio to a MIDI track, and this is wonderful. Now we have really fine control. So if we go up here to my Ari's effects track, and I say, let's do our send, I'm setting the parameters just as we did earlier in this little tab for envelope automation. I select what envelope I would like to automate. Also, I believe that you can, right click and, not in this case. That's only for arrangement view. But click the clip. Make sure your bars are the correct length. And, had I set this, just by clicking a clip, it says start, end, and loop. Always turn loop off. And then make sure to set your duration of your bars. In this case, our Ari's duration is 221 bars. If we look in Leo, we've got 160. And if we look in Virgo, we've got 154. Loop should be turned off. Warp should be turned. I don't think warp is going to be on because this is a MIDI clip. There we go. So we've got our frequency set up. I think we've got some other parameter changes. Yeah, on our trumpet audio effects, our chain selector is selecting number 13. And if we go into our chain selector, we can see if we move this,
numbers here reflect the chain. So now I'm at octave.
Now I'm at LFO. Here I am at Taurus. And now at Gemini, which is great. Oh, look at that delay. So in the clip itself, I've automated the parameter shifts, which I would like to happen over time, which then frees up my hands and my space and my headspace to just perform the music. because now I don't have to worry about these automation changes in the piece. They're done for me. I know that they're always going to be there. And because of the way that I've arranged and set up this music, I can perform and it is always there. There's nothing I have to worry about. I just trigger the tracks and boom, there we are. There is one other track which I've neglected to talk about up until this point, and that is the metronome track. And all I wound up doing in Ableton is, when I had initially set up the MIDI to be recorded, and I'll go to that in just a moment so that way we can see how that developed. I made sure that, again, I had a start and end duration, and I just made a drum track, a drum rack. Probably I used an 808 because I really enjoy making an 808, and just used like the rim shot. And because 120 was set up for this and it's set to 1/4 time, I just made a clip that went on every downbeat, and then I recorded the audio, and that became my metronome. And then I decided how many clicks would be entering before the Ari's track came in. And if I were to show you what that would look like, I would have the audio track up here, wherever, and I would have my metronome track, let's just say right here, and I would make sure that however many clicks, because it was just an infinite loop, I could just set it. However many clicks, in this case I believe it was 8, would be clicking, and then the downbeat would happen, which I believe our lovely ARP sound would then play. If we come into it, we can maybe see it a little bit better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there we go. And then I would know that there we are. But then another question arises: how do we allow for the audio from the metronome to not go to our main output? And I can't necessarily show you this right at this moment because of the way that my audio is set up here, but I'll walk you through those steps if you are having an interface that has more than 2 outputs. So you would have your output set up, and let's say that in this case I've got 4 outputs. I would say, I want my metronome to go to output 3. Terrific. And then on my interface, I would just have my headphones set to output 3. If I have a monitor in front of me, great. They can just, the house can send that to me. Or if I don't have that, I can create an extra audio track, an extra, bus track, return track, and have that go to output 3. And then from there, all I can do is send part of my music, whichever parts I like, to output 3. And to be honest, this is a little bit of a nicer way by doing a return track, because then you have very fine control over what is going to your monitor mix and how much. So if you're like, I really like the microbrute or the ARP there, but I want trumpet to be the loudest thing and metronome to be the second loudest thing, you can actually have fine control over that, and it doesn't affect what is coming out of your main stereo. And this is a wonderful, in this case, I needed it. So I believe that this concludes my approach to Tierkreis. Let me just check my notes before I go on. Terrific. I don't have any more to show you about the template right at this moment. Like I said, if you want to read up a little bit more or see the read about this process, you can go to my website and do that. You can also find the form structure there, and there's only one recording, and it's Ari's that I did a while back. More to come in the future. I'm currently working on some more versions. So let's actually look at a different version of Tierkreis, and hopefully I pull up the right version for us today. You'll have to excuse me if I pull up the wrong one. And let's see if I can find this here. Oh. Well, folks, not sure I've got it on my computer at the moment. Let's see what we've got. My sound will cut out, so just know that that'll happen for a moment. Wonderful. Oh my. So you can even see here, this isn't quite the one I was looking for, but you can see here when I was actually prepping, I was recording everything and making sure that every bit of this aligned. So that way, when it came to performing, let's turn off this reverb.
Okay. Oh my.
Oh, that's a bit much. Okay. So actually, here we are. I found it, luckily. So this is exactly what I was mentioning earlier, right? If we go into this track, we see here we are on this MIDI track. Let's go back to Ari's and let's go back to Mini Brute. There we are. Here is the MIDI. with everything set up straight from Sibelius. So, like I mentioned earlier, there was not much to do after I had gotten it into Ableton. This was here, all my timings were right, all my articulations were right, durations. Again, in this case, I said that the Fs on the second, or the third go around on Ari's would just be Fs in the microbrute, and there it is. We can see. Oh, what a pity. We don't have that at the moment. Oh, on this one we do. I'm not quite sure why this is here on that. Maybe I was doing something and exploring options. Yeah. And so what would normally be here, and I'll just do this for the sake of continuity. All right, this would be set up. It would be going straight to the microbrute. There we are. I would record the audio. Amazing. And actually, if we look, here is the audio. And I just would hit my launch scene button, and I would be recording the audio for both. And I did this several times for each. Pardon me there. I'm getting a little crack. The other thing to really make note of, and this was a huge issue, is tune your synths to proper 440, because if not, you have to re-record everything, or you sound a little out of tune. And there are some ways to adjust this post. I've got a little bit of a detune and a transpose here in case you really mess up your MIDI. But because warping is on, some inconsistencies in the audio wind up coming just as now. And it's just much easier if you take care of these things up front. Okay. Well, all right. So this is setting up probably the most complicated performance template that you could ever imagine. But if you're trying to do a live show that is even using a drum track and a bass track, and you're playing a melody with a band or whatever, this will help you. I actually wound up doing a show with a bassist and a saxophonist, and we were, I was doing live processing in that case, and I was triggering a lot of the samples of the rest of the band, and also live mixing everyone, and doing some live processing, and making sure that the form, when people took solos, would fall right back into itself and didn't jerk around or feel like it was inorganic. I think because I'm a trumpet player, organicism is something that I look for in music, although having something quantized to a grid is great too, but not in that case. So these steps for Tierkreis will also work in those instances. Oh my. Well, the next example that I want to give, the next example I want to give is for a performance in a more free setting, where you as a performer have more liberties to record, play back, and do live processing. So I'm going to switch templates here, And you're going to lose me for just a moment, but then I'll guide you through what I did on this one. Hello, welcome everyone, and I hope you have a great day. Okay, hello. I hope you can hear me just fine. Let's raise this just a tad bit more. Okay, I think this is a bit better. Yeah, there we go. So the template that I'm showing you now is for a duo that I have with a trumpet player, Ethan Marks. And Ethan and I have been playing together for quite a number of years. And we have an improv duo where he plays trumpet and I live process him. And what I mean by that is I am not really making any sound whatsoever. The sound I receive from his microphone, I then take and I put into these audio tracks and I process them. And so each of these audio tracks contains an audio effect. Let's do this one because I think this is one of the most fun that I've ever created. And what I did, this is an early version of it, and there are several versions of these templates because depending on what I'd like to do, I choose my template. And so in this case, I have 8 tracks, which are all receiving right here the audio from the David track, in case me. And we're going to go post effects, which means that post this compressor and EQ, we're going to get it, and it's going to come straight in here. And then voila, just as I have before, I've got nice control over all my parameters through the APC40. And because I'm actually I'm not making sound, I'm not using the trumpet, I am actually tied to the computer and tied to the APC40 as an instrument. And because I've actually created this instrument rack myself, I know what goes where and what does what, and so I'm more so listening to what Ethan is doing and reacting in real time for each of these 8 tracks and bringing them in and out as I see. And usually the way it looks in a live performance is something like this. And then I am in real time adjusting what these parameters are doing. So then I can have just the most absurd situation. And then, oh, it's just so lovely. And then I can do stuff like this, where it just goes on for forever. But perhaps, yes, this is my favorite. Perhaps I could do something like this, but what if I wanted to add to this color? Well, why don't we go to Comp CD and just bring this track up? Oh, yeah. And now I've got a nice mix of these two together. And now I can bring in one, I can bring it out, or I can bring in the other. And so this allows just very fine control over all 8 of these tracks, however I please. And for our concerts, this worked extremely well. And we wound up, doing a concert at CalArts a few years ago. And if we go back, I've actually got that here on my website as well. And let's see, here we are. That wound up becoming a short EP of 10 minutes called Blended Metal. And you can read about that, of course, more so here, and also give it a listen. We won't do that today, but please, if you are have some time, check it out. And if you are really down for it, please buy it. I don't think it's too much, and it's on a record, Cosmic label, Cosmic Primitive Records. So, here we are, looking at the piece. There's some information regarding it and some nice photos that I took and a little backstory about me and Ethan. And so that's this version of the template. If we go to another version, a more updated version, that's totally not what I want. Well, let's actually go here because this is an evolution of this performance template. Okay, I think this should work. Let's give myself a little bit of more of. There we go. I'm sure this is a little bit better for you if you can hear that. Great. So this is a more updated version of that template that Ethan and I were using, and I'll let you know that those 8 tracks from the previous iteration, what I wound up doing is in this rack 1, I've wound up calling it Ultimate Rack, and I created an effects rack with a chain selector, and as I move through the chain selector, you'll actually see all of the same audio effects that I've created prior. And now they're in a little bit more streamlined audio effects rack. However, you'll also notice that all the parameters for each of them, and let's go back to Grain Monster because that's what we were working previously. You'll notice that all of these are then mapped 1 chain up. That's a byproduct of me trying to find a solution to perform live. And this works well. You have a little bit less of control because of it being global, that in the sense that all of the parameters, all of the parameters for each of the audio effects, all of the parameters for all of the audio effects are now tied to this ultimate rack chain. But if we look even farther, I have rack 1, rack 2, rack 1, rack 2. Why do I have 2 versions of the same things? Well, down just a little bit farther, right at the bottom, we see that it says A and B's. And down here right by the master, we have this little X, which is for crossfade. And on my APC40, I'm able to crossfade. So one parameter that I've actually been able to really do well is adjust, and let's do this now, adjust the audio effects racks, and now I'm able to crossfade between them. So even though I don't have 8 tracks and that I can control them individually, I have 2 sets of 16, well, a set of, that 8 tracks times 2, and now I'm able to adjust each of them on this crossfade. So if we look here, I'm going to be crossfaded to the left. Where are we here? And so, And so if we look right here on this track, we've got the grain monster, and let's actually go to miles away. There we go. Give it a little bit of that and a longer delay. Open up the filter. There we go. And so now we've got that, but now that I've shifted the crossfade, we don't hear it anymore, but I can always bring it back for a moment. And this is a great control for my tracks, because as we see in Ultimate Rack 1, we have what we had previously, and then in Ultimate Rack 2, I've got a whole bunch of new effects that I did not have before, and now I can control each of them. And not only that, but I can crossfade between them, and then really make it something interesting and control a lot of color, transformation of the sound, and so forth. So, this is something that's quite useful if you are either doing live processing, or, as you can see here in this performance template, I record audio tracks. And, you know, if you not only record the audio track, but have parameter automation record on, you will record the audio track, and then you can record automation. And if you want to overdub automation, I believe it is it this? It's one of these two. Session record. There we go. Record button. So you technically could re-record the automation on this. Let's try this for a moment, right? Shall we? Well, we should arm it. Let's see what happens. Well, it seems that it worked. Wonderful. Although I'm not quite sure that I hear the audio, but that's okay. Oh, it would help if the audio was turned up. And is this actually anything? We'll never know. Oh, I would see. Yeah. Anyway, just make sure everything is set to the right place. There's one more template which I would like to share. Wonderful. And we're just a little bit over an hour, and that'll be it for today. But these will play back in real time. I guarantee. Oh. Make sure your crossfade is set to the right place. So if we go back here again, let's go back. There it is. Wonderful. But let me check my notes before I go any farther. Yeah. There's one final template that I'll bring up. You're going to lose me for just a moment. But it comes off the topic that I mentioned earlier of just triggering clips for kind of like an ensemble or something along the sorts. So let's open up this last template, and then I'll give you some final thoughts to think about for your work if you are deciding to do this. Okay, I think this is a bit better. Let's give myself a compressor here too. Wonderful. Okay, I think there we are. So this final template, like I said, was with the intent of triggering clips for a concert. This concert was with the Carillon Trumpet Quartet, and in this concert, they were performing a piece by Maurizio Kagel titled Na un Fern, which is near and far. And the piece originally was a radio piece. So our intention was, oh man, this is like right in front of my face. Our intention was to do this piece live. And, I was approached actually to do this because, trying to do a radio piece live is clearly, it's a big task. And when the radio piece is 40 minutes and the music outside of the trumpets is all basically field recordings, it was a lot of work in order to do this. So what I wound up doing is I had the trumpet part, which were a bunch of fanfares, and I wound up creating or listening to that recording actually a lot, and making a part on top of that score. And my part was more so that I could trigger clips at the proper time. And, as you can see here in my performance template, I've got, timings from 0 to 45 seconds, from 45 seconds to 1 minute, 18 seconds. And it says F1, that means fanfare 1. And as the score would progress, I would trigger these clips. So we would say like, oh, when I'm going to start the show, and I can see down here that I've got about 26 seconds remaining on this clip. So then I could cue the ensemble, the trumpets from wherever they were, acting as not only a performer but as a conductor. And I could give them a 3, 2, 1, and trigger the next sample. Now, this was extremely useful in order to not only coordinate the sections of the piece, but to align everyone, as well as myself. And you'll see that, I've given myself, there are certain loops, samples, loops, quick triggers, auxiliary loops, and this is just me talking. And so the samples were, the way I set this up is that the samples, in this case, were longer clips that played usually throughout the section. And the loops were things that were triggered, and I had these marked in my score. And the quick triggers usually were something that had to be played in real time. And by that, if we look at this section down here where it says bells, I would have to trigger each of those at really specific moments, just as a performer would, during the concert. So in my score, I had those marked down, and I would just be triggering these as the other clips would be playing. Right in this section, I would have the low rumble playing, and then be triggering these other clips. Before moving on to the next section. I'm not going to play any more because I might get unhappy YouTube notifications about music. So this is just another way to approach performing live if you're having to do something with an ensemble as a conductor and coordinating electronics. The final thing that I wanted to just say with all this is that if you have, comments, suggestions, or whatever, leave a comment. Or if you have ideas, or if you're having struggles with your Ableton projects, let me know. I think that the way that I'm approaching Ableton is finding creative solutions for my musical purposes rather than letting the software dictate how I should be using it. At this point, I've spent a fair amount of time learning Ableton and learning how to hack it in some ways. I hope that this tutorial helps you in order to create performance templates, however that may be. And I believe that the next tutorial that I'll do will be actually more in depth on creating a performance template rather than just reviewing them, because the next thing I'm hoping to do is a live show for all of you with a concert that I put on in December. So perhaps in the next week or two we'll look at how I'm going about setting up this performance template, and then at the end of it, I'll give a live concert for all of you to watch. Until then, stay safe, stay diligent, stay motivated, stay creative, and have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening wherever you are in the world, and good luck on your musical endeavors. Until then, subscribe, like, share, whatever you please. Give me all the things that you would like to give, good or bad. Thank you.